Hey there everybody, it's Mark Crilley. I'm back with another How to Draw video. This is number 23 in my ongoing series of chibi videos, some of which double as papercraft videos, and this will be one of them. My concept is to draw a fighter pilot, you know, like one of these old pilots from World War I with the goggles and a scarf going back, and the funny thing about it will be that instead of flying a legitimate airplane, he's going to be flying a folded paper airplane, just like the classic old paper airplane we all made as kids. So what I've got here is a straightforward grid. People like to know the size I'm working at, 3 inches on all sides, and then just split down the middle. And I think what we can do is go ahead and get into drawing some basic guidelines. I'm going to draw his head as he's facing toward the right, and it's going to be a 3/4 point of view. Starts off, you know, basically just like a circle, but as I come around here, I am going to do a little indentation for his cheek, which is generally what happens with chibis drawn in a 3/4 point of view. Maybe not every time, but very often you'll see this kind of shape over here that indicates the contour of the face, basically. And later on I'm going to go ahead and get into drawing his details of the face, like the eyes and so forth. But for now, let's draw just real basic guidelines for like his helmet that will have the goggles on it and so forth. You know, if you look at this point right here that's right in the middle, that might help you for placing all of this stuff conveniently. These lines all sort of converge on that crosshair right there. And now I can move on and draw his shoulder. Let's come in here. This is going to be his going down his back in profile. This comes up and becomes his shoulder. And I'm going to just have, because he's very much in profile, you're really just going to see one arm, and then it'll be understood that the other arm is on the other side. Same for the leg. Interestingly, I'm kind of cheating things a little bit. His body is going to be more in profile than his head. I think I'm turning the head a little bit in space just so that we can see both of his eyes. I don't know about you, those of you who've drawn chibi characters, but I sometimes find it difficult to draw a chibi character's face in profile. And even when I look through the comics, you know, the published manga, and try my best to emulate that classic profile look, it can still look strange to me. So who knows? Maybe that's the subject of a future video. You can see that I've added just a loose guideline for his hand. Both his hands are going to be gripping that sort of classic pilot's steering wheel. Now we can move on to, well, let's finish off the jacket, which is going to be, later on, it'll sort of look like it's flowing back a little bit, maybe the wind blowing it up into the air a little, as he is really doesn't even have a chair the way I'm doing this. He will literally be sitting just on, you know, directly on the paper airplane itself, as if he somehow was able to attach an engine or something inside it, but he didn't bother to give himself a chair to sit in. But this is, you can see hopefully his leg coming up to his knee, which is just like right below his head. And then I wanted to give just a hint of the lower cuff here as he, as we see like a boot. Seems like it would be proper to have him wearing boots. And now I've really just sort of invented off the top of my head some sort of a control bank of controls here that will allow him to look at least semi-convincingly like he's piloting this paper airplane. And you know what, I'm going to bring back my ruler actually, because all of this is what will remain visible on the airplane, and I now realize that it helps if you can see how this goes straight across what will be the bank of controls. And notice how that extends past there. It's sort of centered on this line if you're looking for a guideline. And finally, this is just something, sort of contraption that will have the steering wheel. It's not a wheel, really. It's the two separate right and left hand handles, I guess, that I imagine when I think of someone flying an airplane. And happily, oh, well, the last thing is the scarf. Got to get the scarf in there. And it's just going to go straight back, basically. It's not quite centered on this line, those of you who are really trying to draw exactly what I'm drawing. But, you know, you should feel free to make it your own. Do your own style. But I'm going to have the scarf sort of billowing back here, billowing back. And that actually kind of does it for the super basic guidelines. Now, let me see if I can refocus the camera a little so that we can start to draw the facial features. Now, a couple of things that I probably should have pointed out at the beginning of the video is that this is not ordinary paper I'm working on. It's Bristol board, kind of like a card stock. I'd say the thicker the paper is, the better for the project. You could probably get away with doing this on office paper, but it's just going to be like flopping around. You want something that has a little more sturdiness to it. So, and then what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, when I had the earlier below, you could see there was a fair amount of space below this. That is actually important. Make sure you're not drawing down near the edge of the page, because you're going to need about an inch of paper down here that's going to help hold this character in place. So let's go ahead now and start drawing the facial features. And my idea, and I'm going to erase away even a little bit here, is to give him one of these sweat drops. You know, chibi characters are great for expressing emotion, and I thought this guy's primary emotion is going to be sort of nervousness, hopefully a kind of cute nervousness as he tries to fly this paper airplane. And that nervousness can be shown a little bit by the eyebrows. I often say that the eyebrows are the unsung heroes of facial expressions, and by giving these just a little curve up here in the middle, it's going to show his look of concern. I'm going to go ahead and draw a kind of a triangular shape here for the corner of his eye, coming up like so, and then coming down here to draw the iris. Now, to whatever degree that the iris is like partially visible, or you know, you can see a lot of the whites of the eye, that really makes the person look quite nervous, and that the eye is sort of wide open. But I'm not going to connect this line down to the iris. That's just sort of like a classic manga approach. Rarely see people outlining the entire eye. This eye, much less visible. I'm compressing it quite a bit. And indeed, we may just have to sort of hint at it when we get down to the end of the video. Very often, chibi characters don't have noses. I thought I'd try with this extreme 3/4 point of view, just to give a little dot of a nose. Let the guy have a nose. What? You're going to deny him a nose? And I'll go ahead and do this mouth. I don't know if this is any sort of a classic chibi expression, but for me, when a person is sort of nervous and concentrating, it's always kind of cute if they have like their tongue popping out. To me, that somehow conveys in a kind of humorous way that the person is nervously focused, you know. I'm going to redraw this line just a little bit to kind of hopefully improve the contour. And this is indeed going to be the helmet. How about if what I'll do is I'm going to put a sort of like a side flap that comes down off the helmet that is shielding the ears, maybe. And then what's going to happen here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a little darker over this line. I decided to have his hair poking out just to give a little more interest to the face here. I don't know if the hair would be visible on a real fighter pilot, but this is a cartoon of this idea of the old fighter pilots and how they would have the goggles that in such a way that they could be pushed up on top of the head. And I suppose if he's actually flying, he should have those goggles down. They're not doing him any good if he's not actually using them, but I didn't want to hide his eyes, so I decided he's got the goggles, but maybe he just forgot to put them down. But notice that like this one here is going to be quite visible. I've made a sort of a oval shape here, And within, I'm going to make a second circle to convey the idea of goggles. Make sure that this secondary circle is very near the top. And that way you'll start to convey that form. In fact, I'll probably do an interior line like this so that we really begin to see this a little more three-dimensionally. This goggle over here, though, is facing off in the other direction, and so it's almost in profile. I don't think we're going to see so much in terms of the details over there. And that happily kind of takes care of that. I might do like some stitching here to sort of show that it's made out of leather or something. Why not? Throw in a little stitching. Life's too short not to live it up a little. And I suppose the next thing I should do is move on to the jacket. Now I thought I'll draw like a seam here that goes right across the shoulder. And totally just sort of making this up, but I thought he'd have, it would be nice if he had something that looked a little bit like wings, some sort of a patch, you know, that conveys his status in the Air Force, the paper airplane Air Force. And all of this later on I'm going to be adding color to, but for now I'm just sort of refining the details. Get some wrinkles here on his jacket. They do tend to appear at the elbow, and I always like to have, I do this with sweaters, but I'm going to do it also with this sort of leather bomber jacket. Put a little cuff here with a bunch of lines that, to me, just, it says cuff. I see those lines and I say cuff, it's a cuff. Over here I'm going to get some wrinkles underneath the armpit, I guess it is, and like jacket to sort of fly back. Although this is, I got to think of this as being his leg, so I'm kind of doing some alterations to the jacket. What alterations? What am I, a tailor? Oh, another dad joke. Every one of these videos has just at least one, if not several, terrible dad jokes. And yeah, that's. I thought I'd just sort of to add to this feeling, because my idea is with the with him, once we get him actually onto the paper airplane, with the scarf going back, if the jacket is also sort of billowing back, it'll hopefully convey this idea of him genuinely flying. You know, with you know, it's very much like a rectangle right now, but we want to have it look a little more cloth-like. So what I'm going to do is make a line that comes down like so, and that could be one side. Now, of course, his scarf really has to be sort of remain visible. I guess I'll sort of cheat it back there. And the color, you know, by keeping this color the same, I think I'm going to change. I'm going to bring this down a little. And get some tassels here at the end. That definitely says scarf, right? I think a lot of things you do as a cartoonist just for clarity. Not every scarf has tassels. It's unmistakable. You know, you're doing everything you can to make it clear what it is you're trying to do. I think clarity, you never want person saying, what is it? What is that rectangle at the back of his neck? You know, you're doing everything you can to make sure people don't end up being confused by what they see. Get some wrinkles down here at the waist, certainly with him being all sort of scrunched up like that with his leg, that you'd see a lot of wrinkles there. And I very often will put a seam, and I think because he's in the military, I'm going to actually make it a sort of a bold stripe. Again, I don't know if this is legit. Did they have stripes on their trousers, the fighter pilots of World War I? I don't know for sure, but cut me some slack, people. Anyway, let's go ahead and do the boot. I don't think I'm going to mess around too much. Well, we'll give him some sort of buttons. Why not? Sort of old-timey buttons. And then it's time to come over here and draw his hands. You know, we began with these just sort of circles here. I want this, I want to do a cartoony hand that looks like it is gripped onto one of these. Well, you know, this, like I was saying, I always imagine these controllers that have like a right handle and a left handle, Right now I'm just going to draw it. It almost looks like he's holding a stick of dynamite or something. But that is actually going to be a handle when I bring down a lower part of it and have it connect to this part, which I imagine would be, you know, rotatable for steering purposes. And like I said, he's very nearly in profile, but I'm going to kind of come over here and allow us to see the suggestion of like the other boot in the back here. And by way of coloring, hopefully I can push this other leg back, you know, make it recede a little into the distance. And then over here I'm going to do the same thing, just sort of echoing. Sometimes you can get away with this. You just sort of repeat the same line that you'd drawn before. And that becomes his other hand. Especially with chibi characters, you don't have to worry too much about details with the hands. Thank goodness, because drawing actual hands can be brutal. Right? Am I right, people? I sound like a stand-up comedian. Hey, am I right? Anyway, this last bit down here, I have tried to make a little bit aerodynamic, because it is going to be visible like above the line of the paper airplane later on. I thought just to make it seem to have some structure, like I said, because you see his other hand, you see his other boot, I'm going to have maybe the front of this seem to recede a little. You can hear all my pencils. Crilly, clean off your desk already. Come on, guy. How much time does it take? You can put those pencils away. Anyway, I'm putting on a sort of a metal edge here, really just to convey the structure of this thing and maybe show, hopefully, that it's made out of steel. So I'm adding like rivets across the upper surface here. Not too many, just a couple. And later on, combining that with a little color like gray, it'll hopefully convey a sort of a metallic surface. I'm going to put one extra line up here for this structure, the steering handle structure thing. And happily, that might be it. Now I'm going to do something a little different from what I've done in the previous Papercraft videos. I'm actually going to color first, cut it out with scissors, and then apply the black lines. And I'll explain later on why I decided to try that technique this time. But for now, let me go out. I'm going to take a moment to erase these guidelines, and then I'm going to bring in some markers to begin adding color. Alright, so I'm going to come in here with a marker and begin to add color. I'm going to do just a little bit of this real time, but I'm going to very soon kick it into time-lapse because I just don't think that, you know, it's just not a coloring video. It's more about getting the basic guidelines in place and then later on showing you how we will combine this character with an actual folded paper airplane. But I did want to say, you know, sometimes people get you know, maybe understandably, they really latch onto the idea of this is a tutorial, I must follow every step in the tutorial as it is presented to me, and I just wanted to encourage you, don't feel, with my videos, don't feel that that is the case. Like, for example, I'm using markers, but that's just my choice right now today. You don't have to use markers. You could do this with colored pencil. You could do it with watercolor. I mean, one of the challenges with watercolor, one of the reasons I chose not to do this with watercolor is that watercolor, as you all know, can make the paper wrinkle. And then when when I cut this character out and place him, you know, sort of vertically into the paper airplane, I don't want the paper to be, you know, sort of wilted the way it can get with markers, or with watercolor, I mean. But if you've got thick enough paper, and you know, and if you're applying, let's say, gouache, like really quite thick paint, that probably won't make point. If indeed I ever had one, was that feel free to make it your own. Don't feel like, oh, I gotta go, what marker is that? I need to go out and buy that marker. It's like, no, that's not what these That's not what these lessons are about. It's just me hopefully sparking your creativity and making you think, oh, I could do something like that, right? And then you sit down and you do your own variation on this little craft project idea that I've come up with. I'm going to go ahead and have his other knee back here. You'll notice that I've made this all like one continuous shape so that when it's time to cut out with the scissors along the edge, that it'll be, you know, as easy as possible, basically. And I think that's it for the real time, sadly. You're going to see me use markers to finish coloring in all the rest of this, and then we're going to come back and a bottom tab that goes on here, but then we're going to cut it first and then do the outlines. All right, and we're pretty much done with the coloring, but no, we are not, because we haven't added the blushes. Yes, even daring fighter pilots can get a case of the blushies. Also, I think I'll go ahead and color in the tongue with the same blushy color. What to do is refocus the camera so as to draw this bottom tab part, and then, yeah, we're going to pull out the scissors and go ahead and cut this baby out. So yeah, I probably should have done this back at the beginning, but better late than never. I'm going to go ahead and put in, just going about down by one. Make sure that the way you fold the paper airplane anticipates this sort of 1-inch rectangle here that is going to hold him in place. And that is probably all we need there. This whole thing isn't even going to be seen, so we don't have to fuss about it too much. But I'm going to go ahead and grab the scissors, and we're going to start cutting this out. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and start a little of this real time. One of the nice things about this particular project is you don't have to cut the line with an X-Acto knife, craft knife, as it has been the case with a lot of these other ones. Because this is not really a pop-up, this is, you know, I'm cutting it all the way out. So I just thought I'd show you for a moment that I'm taking my time with it. You know, after all this time you've spent drawing and coloring it, you don't want to accidentally cut poorly. But my idea this time of using, you know, coming in with the colored pencil later is hopefully going to improve the process. I noticed when I was a lot of times cutting, you know, I'd draw the line first and then cut it out, cut the paper out with either the knife or the scissors. I found that my line was getting damaged by the blade, and I think by actually doing the line after you've done the cut, it may fix that problem. We will soon find out. In fact, let's go ahead and finish this off in time-lapse, and then we'll be back to do some of the line work. Alright, so now I'm grabbing my trusty black Prismacolor, which is really just a black colored pencil. Should be able to find a pencil like this in any quality colored pencil set. And I'm going in and doing the outer edge of the lines, and I'm sort of holding the pencil at an angle and allowing the paper, you know, the edge of the paper to sort of guide my pencil in a way. And yeah, sure enough, I think this is going to be a superior method after all these times of doing these craft projects. It never really dawned on me that I could do the line work at the end and end up with a nice, clean, black line. And, you know, you can see it going off on, as long as you've got scrap paper there that you don't really care about, that's not a big issue. Oh, I forgot to say, when I got to the coloring stage, I thought, why not a buckle? Hey! Can't the guy have a buckle on his goggles? So I actually, just using the color, I dashed that in real quick, and now I can outline it a bit and make it official. The man has a goggle buckle. Goggle buckle. Goggle buckle. But you can't say that 3 times fast. But I think you're getting the basic idea. I'm not going to spend this whole time doing real time for adding the lines, but I suppose I just point out that a double advantage of holding off on doing these lines at the end is it does as I always say, it allows you to make some choices about what you choose to outline and choose not to outline. So yeah, I think I discovered a new approach. Save the lines for last. And I may, even with my more sort of pop-out type craft projects where it has to be cut with an X-Acto blade, I may still try this approach, see if it works. Anyway, let's go ahead and kick it into time-lapse. Bring in old man time-lapse. I'm old enough to remember when they had biplanes like that. And we'll go ahead and finish off adding all of the final line work. Alright, well, we're done with all the line work, and I did want to point out that I've added some shading here, you could see, but basically I decided for simplicity's sake to stick with just the one. Brought out a variety of colored pencils. Of course, you should feel free to do that, but I thought, let's try to keep it simple for those who don't have access to a whole bunch of different materials. Just the markers and the one black colored pencil. No gouache, sorry. A couple of weeks ago, I did a spectacular gouache fest with the Millennium Falcon video, and I think we'll give the gouache a rest. As I said, trying to keep this one relatively simple in terms of the supplies needed. Well, I'm going to go ahead and change location, actually, so as to have a better place for folding the paper airplane. Alright, so what would our garden use, frankly, so no need to get anything fancy. I just thought it might be a little more interesting than a piece of office paper. Now, I'm going to be folding a standard paper airplane, what I would call a standard paper airplane. Growing up in America, this was the kind of paper airplane that every kid knew how to make, and I was even going to just skip through this part of the video because I thought, oh, everybody knows how to make a paper airplane. But then I stopped and I thought, I don't know if everyone, especially I have sort of an international audience here on YouTube. I figured, let's go ahead and do this real time. And even those of you who know how to do this form of paper airplane, you might not want to skip all the way through because there is a point at which the fold needs to coordinate with our little project. So anyway, for those of you who've never made a paper airplane before, like this one, you go ahead, you fold it in half like I just did, long way, and then you're going to be folding like this on both sides. In fact, I'm going to do the top in time-lapse. Okay, so there you go. You got the both folded in on either side, and after that, it's a simple matter of folding a second time, making this line up with that central valley fold that you created back at the beginning, and then doing your best to get this to come to a real nice point. And we all know from childhood it doesn't always work out that way. You just continue that fold all the way down, and it should end up sort of like that at the end. And again, to save time, I'll go ahead and do the exact same fold on the other side in time-lapse. Alright, now at this stage we do want to start to coordinate with the Papercraft project that we created earlier, because what I'm going to do is take our little pilot character and move him in so that he is sort of in position. Hold it down so that it's really lined up perfectly with that what I was calling the valley fold, and here is where we need to coordinate. In fact, let me zoom in a little bit here. Alright, so here's where, you would always fold this down when you're making this style of paper airplane, but this time it becomes very important to line up with that first black outline that you made along the bottom of the character. So that's why I thought even those of you who know how to make the paper airplane, you might want to see this part, that you're not just folding randomly, you are sort of custom designing this paper airplane to fit the character that you created. Now that I'm done with that, I can set him aside. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over and fold it down so that it matches on both sides. And I guess I was going to time lapse, but hey, why not just go ahead and do this real time. And I should point out that there are lots of different ways of making paper airplanes, and as long as they have a central little valley fold like this, they should work just fine for this project. But let's go ahead and change the point of view of the camera. I want to do the unveiling so that you see him take control of his paper airplane in flight. All right, well, I don't know if it's going to be clear what this is, but this is an object that I bought in Japan. It has a little clip on it. You can use it for putting, I don't know, maybe a note to yourself, something on your to-do list. But I thought it would be perfect for displaying our little paper airplane pilot. I'll go ahead and slide him into place, and ta-da! There he is, piloting his fine aircraft. Let me go ahead and refocus a little so you can see the details. All right, well, there we have our fine chibi paper airplane pilot off to save the day in his trusty paper airplane. Rest assured, this is not the last of these kinds of videos. In fact, I came up with another idea just the other day. I won't do it immediately, maybe a couple of months from now, for doing another one of these pop-up chibi videos. But for now, let's go ahead and wind this one down. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.